You need to pay attention right now!
The classroom thought he was lying. The teacher thought she was teaching him a lesson. But what she didn't know was that the little black boy she humiliated had a father powerful enough to make CEOs kneel. And in less than 5 minutes, that father would walk into her classroom, and her voice would never sound the same again. Comment your thoughts, what time you're watching, and where you're watching from. And hit subscribe, because what happens next will shock you. The bell for first period hadn't even finished ringing when Anderson Hebron slipped quietly into room 4B of Lincoln Elementary School. He was always early, partly because he liked the silence before the chaos, partly because the hallways were safer when they were empty. Anderson was a small, soft-spoken black fourth grader, the kind of child who held his backpack straps tightly as if they kept him anchored. He almost never caused trouble, not because he feared punishment, but because trouble usually found him first. He walked to his desk, third row from the back, second seat to window, and lowered himself into the chair without making a sound. The classroom smelled like dry markers and old carpet. Posters on the wall said you can do hard things and be kind, but even at age 10, Anderson knew those posters didn't apply to everyone. Not here, not to him. A group of boys entered moments later, laughing, pushing each other, loud enough to fill the whole room. One of them, Carter, made sure to bump Anderson's shoulder as he passed. "Watch it," Carter snickered. "Didn't see you there. You're too quiet, dude." The other boys laughed. Anderson forced a smile. Sorry. He always apologized, even when he didn't do anything wrong. 2 girls across the room whispered something while looking at him. One giggled. The other rolled her eyes. Anderson didn't have to hear the words to know what they meant. They always meant the same thing. He thinks he's better than us. He dresses too nice. His mom probably buys those clothes, not his dad. His dad probably isn't even around. Little cuts, little wounds, little things people said when they didn't think he was listening. But he heard everything. He always did. The door swung open sharply at 8:01 a.m., and in walked Miss Kate Moore, her red blazer bright enough to demand attention. She was the kind of teacher who believed she was always right, the kind whose smile tightened when she spoke to certain students, the kind who praised some kids loudly and corrected others silently, but sharply. She clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, settle down. Today we're starting with a writing assignment." Groans echoed across the room. Kate ignored them. "Take out your notebooks." Chairs scraped. Papers rustled. Anderson reached carefully into his backpack and pulled out his notebook, its edges bent from constant opening, its cover decorated with faded stickers he'd placed years ago. Kate paced in front of the whiteboard and finally said the words that would change everything. "Write a 1-page description of your father's job." Anderson froze. His pencil stopped midair. His throat tightened just a little. Around him, kids were already writing. "My dad works at the auto shop. My dad's a firefighter. My dad owns a bakery." Easy answers. Normal answers. Not his answer. Anderson pressed the eraser end of his pencil to his forehead. His father wasn't a mechanic. He wasn't a firefighter. He didn't bake bread or run a store. His father was Mark Hebron. Not just rich, not just well-known. A billionaire, CEO of Hebron Industries, the tech company that powered nearly half the devices in the country. But Anderson rarely saw him. Not because his father didn't love him, but because the world loved his father too much. Mark Hebron couldn't walk into a movie theater without being recognized. He couldn't attend a school open house without cameras and reporters swarming the parking lot. He couldn't sit in the audience for Anderson's school play without causing a lockdown for security reasons. And so, for Anderson's protection and privacy, Mark stayed out of school, out of public view, out of the parts of his son's life that he wished he could be present for. And as a result, many people, including the kids at school, assumed Anderson had no father at all. Anderson swallowed hard. His classmates didn't know. Most adults didn't know. Even teachers didn't know. Only the principal knew, and she promised to keep it quiet. So Anderson had lived quietly, anonymously until now. He stared at the blank page. Then he remembered his father's words. Never hide the truth, Son, people might doubt you, but never doubt yourself. His chest rose and fell with a deep breath. He pressed his pencil to the paper. Slowly, carefully, he wrote, "My father is Mark Hebron, CEO of Hebron Industries." He even drew the company logo beside it, a small outline of the Hebron H. When he pulled back to read what he'd written, he felt the familiar sting of fear in his stomach. He wasn't supposed to write that. He wasn't supposed to attract attention. But he was tired of pretending, tired of lying by omission, tired of feeling ashamed of the truth he had no reason to hide. For the first time in weeks, he felt a tiny spark of pride, a tiny spark that didn't last long. The moment the boy behind him, Logan, leaned forward and saw the words, the spark began to dim. Logan's eyebrows shot up. "Uffed! Yeah, right," he muttered loudly. Two kids nearby leaned closer to look. "No way," another whispered. "Is he serious? He's lying again. My mom said he makes stuff up." And then the laughter started. Not loud at first, but enough. Enough to make Anderson sink an inch deeper in his seat. He tried to cover the page with his hand. Too late. The whispers grew stronger, snickering spreading to the room like a slow, poisonous fog. Anderson heard someone say, if his dad was a billionaire, he wouldn't be wearing the same backpack every year. Another voice said, he probably saw the logo on the news and copied it. Anderson closed his eyes. He'd known this would happen. He just hoped maybe today would be different. Kate Moore was walking up and down the aisles, scanning pages, mentally grading them before they were even finished. She stopped next to Carter, praising his neat handwriting. She stopped near Sarah, smiling at her colorful drawing. She stopped beside Logan, nodding approvingly. Then she reached Anderson. She saw him quickly pull his hand over the page. She frowned. "Anderson, move your hand, please," she said softly, but not kindly. He hesitated. Kate Moore didn't like hesitation. "Now," she snapped. Slowly, embarrassed, Anderson pulled his hand away. Kate leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed. Suspicion flickered across her face like a shadow. She read the sentence once, twice. Then she lifted the notebook off his desk as if she found something offensive. "Really?" she whispered sharply. "This again?" Anderson blinked. This again. He'd never told her anything about his father, but the way she looked at him, the way she tilted her head, the way her lips pulled tight with irritation, like she'd already decided he was lying, like she'd already judged him. Around them, students turned in their chairs to watch. Kate raised her eyebrow at Anderson in a way that made his stomach drop. Her voice grew sharper. "What exactly is this supposed to be?" And before Anderson could answer, she closed the notebook with a hard slap, held it tightly in her hand, and gave him a glare so sharp it sliced through whatever confidence he had left. A glare that said, "You think you can get away with this?" A glare that said, "I don't believe you." A glare that said, "Trouble is coming. What she does next will break him and expose her." Calming your thoughts so far, what time you're watching, and where you're watching from. The room was already too quiet. Not the normal classroom kind of quiet. Not the quiet of kids focusing or mornings dragging. This was a heavy, dangerous quiet of a storm forming. And Anderson Hebron felt it first. He felt it in the way Miss Kate Moore stood at the front of class, his notebook hanging from her fingers like something she'd pulled out a trash can. He felt in the air, thick with judgment and heat. He felt in the way every student watched her, then him, then her again. Kate pressed her lips together, eyes locked on the cover of the notebook, as if deciding how best to break its contents apart. Slowly, she turned, holding the notebook up between two fingers. "Anderson," she said sharply, "would you like to explain this?" 24 heads swiveled toward him. Anderson's heart slammed against his ribs. His voice barely escaped. I just wrote what you said." Kate snapped the book open again. Her eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe," she said loudly, so loudly the words bounced off the walls, "that your father is Mark Hebron?" A ripple of gasps spread to the room. A few boys snickered. A girl whispered, "He's doing it again." Someone else muttered, "He lies for attention." Anderson shook his head quickly. I'm not lying. Kate raised one hand to silence him. Her face hardened. Anderson, I have been teaching for 23 years. I have seen children exaggerate. I have seen them make up stories. I have seen them pretend to be someone they're not. She stepped closer. But this, she pointed to Paige, is ridiculous. Laughter exploded from the back of the classroom. Anderson flinched. Every laugh stabbed deeper. Carter pointed at him. Oh my God, Anderson. Just admit you made it up. More laughter followed. Anderson shook his head again, chest shaking. No, my dad. Kate slammed the notebook shut, so loudly the sound cracked through the class like a whip. Enough. Anderson's breath hitched. Kate leaned forward, hovering over his desk, inches from his face. She held the notebook up, as if displaying evidence in a courtroom. This, she said, shaking it, is a lie. No, it's not, Anderson whispered, voice trembling. Kate's eyebrows shot up, insulted. Excuse me? I'm not lying, Anderson whispered again, and his bottom lip began to quiver. That single movement unleashed the room. The kids laughed harder now, pointing, mocking, repeating her words. Liar. Just tell the truth. Your dad isn't a billionaire. My dad said rich people don't look like you. Anderson's eyes burned. His throat tightened. But he kept trying to speak over the noise, trying to explain. My dad, he really is. He just doesn't. He can't come to school because... Oh, stop, Kate snapped. Then she did it. She waved the notebook at him like garbage, like filth, like something that didn't belong in her hands. Anderson, she said loudly, her voice dripping with condescension. I am tired of you pretending, tired of you making up stories, tired of you trying to get attention. I'm not, he cried. The tears came now, unstoppable, hot, painful. Kate lowered herself until she was at eye level with him, nose almost touching his. Her voice dropped to an icy whisper, but the room was so still, every child heard it. Stop lying about your father. Anderson gasped like she'd struck him. He covered his face with his hands. But she wasn't done. She grabbed a notebook, opened to the page, and turned it for the entire class to see. Class, she announced, this, she pointed to words, is why honesty matters. Lies cannot be rewarded. The kids leaned forward. They were enjoying this, enjoying him breaking, enjoying his humiliation. Two boys snorted with laughter. A girl in the front row whispered, I knew he didn't have a dad. Anderson couldn't breathe. He pressed his shaking hands to his eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they kept falling faster, heavier. I'm not lying, he whispered weakly. My dad, he really is Mark Hebron. Kate rolled her eyes, disgusted. Do you know what's sad? She said, folding the notebook shut. That you actually think people will believe this. Anderson felt the room sway. His chest rose and fell too fast. He wiped tears with his sleeve, but they kept coming, like the humiliation was squeezing them out of him. He tried to say something, anything, but the words came out broken. My dad... He said it's okay to tell the truth. Oh, please, Kate scoffed. Your father did not tell you that. Because your father, she raised her voice, does not even work here. Anderson blinked, confused. Why would my dad work here? He whispered. Kate opened her mouth to continue the tirade. But then something happened. Something subtle. Something only Anderson saw. The door to the classroom, still closed, suddenly cast a shadow beneath it. A pair of feet, standing on the other side, waiting, watching. But no one else noticed yet. Kate inhaled, preparing to deliver one final blow. Anderson Hebron, she snapped. You need to learn that. BRRZZD. The intercom crackled. Kate froze mid-sentence. Everyone looked up. The room was silent. The principal's voice came through the speaker, unusually stiff, unusually formal. Mrs. Moore. A long pause. Hold your class. Kate frowned. The kids exchanged confused looks. The intercom continued. You have the visitor. A visitor? At 9:20 in the morning? Kate straightened her blazer, flustered, confused, suddenly nervous without knowing why. Anderson's heart began to pound in his ears, because the feet outside the door were still there, waiting, breathing, watching, and though he couldn't see the face, something in his chest whispered one impossible word. "Dad?" The intercom crackles. "Mrs. Moore, hold your class. You have a visitor." Everything Anderson knows is about to shatter. If this part shocked you, hit subscribe as this goes crazier. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Nobody dared to even blink. The intercom message still hung in the air like smoke. "Mrs. Moore, hold your class. You have the visitor." A visitor? During class hours? Without warning? Without announcement? Something wasn't normal. Something wasn't right. Kate Moore's face twisted in annoyance first. Then something else began to creep through her expression. Something fragile. Something uneasy. Fear. Anderson saw it first. The slightest tremble in her hand. The way her eyes flicked toward the door, like she expected a ghost to walk through. Even the classroom felt different now, as if the air itself pulled tighter, as if the walls leaned in to listen, as if the entire school was holding its breath. It started softly, a distant thump, a muffled drumbeat from far down the hallway. Then another, then another, then another. Steady, purposeful, heavy, not the footsteps of a principal, not the shuffle of a parent coming for pickup, not the panicked rush of a late teacher. These footsteps had weight, authority, command. Each impact echoed closer, vibrating to the floor, shaking the desks, sending strange chills up the spine of every child in the room. A boy whispered, "Who's that?" A girl whispered, "Those footsteps sound big." Even the class clown didn't joke. Not this time, because whoever was coming, didn't sound ordinary. Kate Moore stood perfectly still, her red blazer stretched stiff across her shoulders as she turned toward the door, her lips parted, just a little, as if she were about to say something, but couldn't. The footsteps grew louder, closer, stronger. Kate swallowed hard. Anderson saw her do it, saw the way her throat clicked, saw the way her breathing shortened, saw the way her face drained of color, because the hallway wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with the sound of multiple footsteps, heavy boots, fast-paced steps, something metallic clinking, and then the shadow appeared, long, tall, wide-shouldered, stretching across the crack beneath the door like a solid wall. Several students gasped. One girl covered her mouth. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to flicker. And then another shadow joined it. Then another. Then another. 4 shadows. All aligned, all waiting, and all standing directly in front of classroom door. Kate's voice cracked. "W's out there?" Silence. Only the breathing of 24 terrified children. Only the rattling vent. Only the pounding heartbeat in Anderson's ears. The shadows didn't move. Not yet. They were waiting. Waiting for something. Waiting for someone. Then the doorknob twitched. Not fully turning. Just twitching, like someone was testing it. Every child in the room jolted. Kate inhaled sharply. The knob twisted again, slowly this time. Creak. A beam of hallway light sliced into the classroom as the door cracked open just an inch. Kate took a step backward. "Excuse me," she attempted, voice trembling. "What is going?" The door pushed open another centimeter, and a large hand, muscular, gloved, appeared on the edge of the frame. A black-suited figure stepped into view. Then another. 2 men, tall, broad, expressionless, wearing matching security uniforms with silver earpieces. They didn't smile. They didn't blink. They didn't speak. They simply scanned the classroom with slow, controlled movements, the kind of movements trained professionals used, the kind that meant someone important is coming. The children froze. Kate stammered, "Officers? Can I help you?" One guard raised a hand slightly, not to greet her, but to silence her, and she obeyed. Instantly, her mouth snapped shut, her hands folded, her shoulders lowered. The authority coming off those 2 men was enough to shut down her voice completely. Anderson felt something strange in his chest. Recognition. Like he'd seen men like this before. Like he'd seen them stand outside buildings, outside cars, outside private jets. His heart pounded harder. Could it be? Could it really be? The guard stepped aside, completely silent, completely synchronized, like two steel doors sliding open, making space, making room, making way for someone else, someone taller, someone heavier, someone who didn't just walk down hallways, but owned the buildings connected to them. Every child leaned forward in slow motion. Desks creaked, chairs squeaked, breaths shook. Kate clutched her red blazer with trembling fingers and whispered, "Who? Who is coming in here?" No one answered. No one needed to, because there was only one person in the world who traveled with guards like these, whose footsteps sounded like rolling thunder, whose entrance could freeze an entire room. Anderson's heart lifted into his throat. He felt it. He knew it. He could sense it in his bones. The doorknob turned fully. Ka-chunk! The classroom held its breath. The guards straightened their posture. Anderson's small hands clenched his desk. His tears dried instantly, because the man outside was someone the world feared, someone the stock market watched, someone CEOs followed, someone magazines wrote about, someone people didn't just recognize, they revered. And he was standing right outside the fourth grade classroom. His father. The hinges groaned. Light flooded in. And then a silhouette stepped across the threshold, broad shoulders first, then the impeccable navy blue suit, tailored, pressed, expensive enough to silence a room on sight. A tall black man entered, perfect posture, jaw set, expression unreadable. A billionaire-grade presence that radiated power. His shoes clicked against the classroom tiles with calm, controlled precision, the kind of precision that says, "I do not walk into rooms. Rooms adjust to me." Kate Moore's mouth dropped open. Her knees bent slightly. Her eyes widened in utter horror. One student whispered, "No way." Another whispered, "Is that?" Anderson didn't blink. Couldn't blink. He whispered one word under his breath. "Dad." The tall man stopped, right in the center of the room. He looked forward, eyes sharp, voice deep, heavy, authority dripping from every syllable. But he didn't speak. Not yet. He looked straight at Anderson, right into the boy's trembling, tear-stained eyes. The boy who'd been mocked, humiliated, screamed at. An entire classroom froze around them. Time suspended. Lights dimmed. The world shrank into a single moment. Just father and son. Finally in the same room. Finally breaking a lie that the world forced Anderson to swallow. And then the man stepped forward, ready to say the words that would change everything. The classroom door swings open, revealing a tall man in a navy blue billionaire-grade suit. Everything explodes. Who do you think just walked in? Comment below if you're still following. For a long moment, the classroom wasn't a classroom anymore. It was a stage, a courtroom, a battlefield. And standing at the center of it, commanding attention, silencing the air itself, was Mark Hebron, billionaire, tech magnate, media obsession, father, the man every student had seen on magazine covers, the man whose name adults whispered when discussing money or innovation, the man whose face flashed during every major tech conference, was standing right there, less than 10 feet from a chalkboard. His navy blue suit looked like it had been hand-stitched by angels. His wristwatch glowed like liquid gold, and his expression, cold, hard, controlled, the kind of expression that made powerful CEOs fold in seconds. But beneath that powerful exterior was something else, a softness, a pain, a father seeing his child broken. Gasps rippled across the room. "He's real. Wait, that really is him. Oh my God," Anderson wasn't lying. "That's the guy from Forbes." A girl at the back slapped her friend's arm, whispering fiercely, "That's his dad." Even the troublemakers went silent. Even the class clown lowered his head. The weight of what they had done, what they said, how they laughed, crashed down on them all at once. Every pair of eyes swung between Mark and Anderson. The room understood in one painful, unforgettable moment that the quiet boy they mocked was telling the truth all along. The woman in the red blazer, the teacher who moments ago screamed in a child's face, stood frozen near her desk. Her mouth hung open, wide, empty, silent. Her hands trembled as she held Anderson's notebook. Her authority, her confidence, her superiority complex, all shattered the instant Mark Hebron stepped into the room. Because she didn't just see a father. She saw a billionaire. Not a rumor, not an exaggeration, not a child's fantasy. A real, terrifying, powerful billionaire. Looking around her classroom with eyes cold enough to cut through steel, she stammered, and Mr. Hebron, I didn't know, I didn't think, I thought. But Mark didn't look at her. Not yet. He walked right past her, as if she didn't exist. He knelt in front of Anderson's desk, slowly, carefully, with a gentleness that did not match the power he carried. "Anderson," he whispered, voice deep and steady. "Look at me." The boy lifted his head. Tears streaked his cheeks. Mascara-dark rings formed beneath his eyes. His chest trembled with broken breaths. But when he saw his father, he broke, completely. "Dad." The word cracked like glass falling. Mark's eyes softened instantly. He opened his arms, and Anderson ran into them. Not walked, not stepped, ran. Full force, full emotion, full desperation. The entire classroom watched as the boy buried his face in his father's chest, sobbing into the navy blue fabric, gripping the billionaire like the world had been beating him. And this was the only place he felt safe. Mark wrapped one arm around his son's shoulders and the other across his back, pulling him close. He held him like a father who wished he had been there sooner, like a father who realized something terrible had been happening behind closed doors, like a father who now understood his son had been fighting alone for too long. "Son," Mark murmured, resting his chin gently atop the boy's head. "Are you okay?" Anderson shook his head into his father's suit. "No. She said I was lying. Everyone laughed. She said you're and not my dad." Mark closed his eyes. Slowly, painfully, his jaw tightened. His breathing deepened. Because something inside Mark Hebron, something fierce and protective, pulled awake. If the classroom were quiet before, it was dead silent now. Not one child made a sound. Not one chair moved. Not one breath dared break the stillness. Every student knew whatever happened next was no longer school business. It was something far, far bigger. He placed a hand on the back of Anderson's head. "Stay right here, son," he whispered. Then he rose, slowly, deliberately, like a storm gathering strength. And for the first time since entering the room, he turned toward her, Ms. Kate Moore, the red blazer teacher whose confident voice had filled the classroom just minutes ago. Now pale, now shaking, now clutching Anderson's notebook like it was burning her hands. Mark's eyes locked onto her, cold, sharp, unblinking. His voice changed. Gone was the gentle father. Gone was the soft whisper. This new voice was steel. "Mrs. Moore," Mark said, stepping forward, "I believe you and I have something to discuss." Kate stumbled back against her desk. Mr. Hebron, I didn't... It wasn't... he wrote. Mark continued walking. Steady, controlled, eyes cutting through her like sunlight through glass. The students watched in stunned amazement. It felt like a movie scene. A billionaire confronting a teacher. A father confronting the bully of his child. A moment none of them would ever forget. And as Mark got closer, Kate's knees visibly weakened. Because she knew she was about to face the consequences of humiliating a 10-year-old boy. She knew her screams, insults, accusations, and mockery were about to be exposed. And she knew the man walking toward her had the power to end her career with a single sentence. Mark took another step, and another. He stopped 2 feet in front of her, tilted his head, looked directly into her terrified eyes, and then he said only 2 words. "Explain yourself. If you're still watching, subscribe. This is just getting started." If the room was tense before, now it felt like the air itself was trembling. Mark Hebron, billionaire, CEO, father, stood inches from Kate Moore, and she looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Her voice, her pride, her iron teacher attitude gone. Melted. All that remained was a shaking woman trapped in a storm she created herself. She clutched Anderson's notebook to her chest like a shield made of paper, trembling so hard the pages rattled. Mr. Hebron, I didn't know he was your... Mark raised one hand. Just a hand. But the gesture hit harder than a shout. Stop. Kate froze instantly. His voice cut to the classroom like a blade. Calm, cold, unshakable. Behind him, Anderson sat quietly at his desk, face still damp with tears, hands clasped tightly, watching his father with a mixture of fear, relief, and awe. The other students didn't breathe. Not even the troublemakers dared whisper. The entire classroom had transformed into a courtroom, and Mark Hebron was both judge and executioner. Mr. Hebron, you have to understand, he wrote something that seemed impossible. I never imagined. Mark stepped closer suddenly. Kate's breath caught. You didn't imagine? He repeated softly. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Yes, no. I thought he was. I truly believed. I wasn't trying to hurt. Mrs. Moore. His voice cracked the air. Kate jumped like he'd slapped the desk. Mark's eyes narrowed. I didn't come here to listen to excuses. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Her face was pale. Her eyes glistened with panic. Her entire body seemed to wobble like it could crumble to the floor. Mark turned slightly, glancing at the room. The children, the walls, the desks, the cheap posters telling students to believe in yourself. Then he looked back at Kate. Let me ask you something, he said quietly. Kate blinked rapidly. Yes? Why? Mark said. Did my son's truth sound impossible to you? Kate's mouth moved, but no sound came. Mark stepped even closer. You didn't doubt him because the story was unbelievable. He paused. You doubted him because he was the one saying it. Kate's chin shook. Her eyes flicked toward Anderson for half a second. And that half second was enough. Mark saw it. He leaned forward, voice low, the kind of low that vibrated in the bones. You couldn't imagine someone who looks like my son, he gestured at Anderson, having a father who looks like me. The entire class gasped. Kate stumbled backward, hitting her desk with a thud. And no, you got it wrong. I didn't mean, I'm not. You are, Mark said sharply. No shouting, no rage, just truth, unavoidable, undeniable, undeniably crushing. You assumed his father must be a janitor, or unemployed, or simply absent. You assumed a black boy with quiet manners must be exaggerating, because your mind refuses to place him in the world I occupy. Kate shook her head violently. That's not true. I would never. Then explain, Mark demanded. Why calling him a liar was easier for you than believing a 10-year-old child. Kate's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. But Mark wasn't finished. The students watched in stunned shock. Some lowered their heads, ashamed. Some stared at Anderson in disbelief. Some looked at Kate as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Anderson, still sitting at his desk, pulled his knees together, hugging himself. His breathing steadied, but his eyes were full of everything he'd held inside for years. Loneliness, frustration, exhaustion, pain, all because no one believed him. No one thought he belonged to someone extraordinary. Mark's voice softened, but the softness made the truth even more brutal. You didn't see a boy telling the truth, he said. You saw a boy who didn't fit your idea of success. Kate broke. She covered her face with her hands. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I didn't realize. Mark tilted his head. Exactly, he said. You didn't realize. His voice lowered again. And that is the problem. Tears spilled down her cheeks now. She wasn't a powerful teacher anymore. She wasn't the authority. She wasn't in control. She was a woman standing in the ruins of her own bias, and she felt it crumble around her like concrete dust. I should have handled it differently, she whispered. I should have asked. I should have been kinder. I should have. Mark cut in gently, but firmly. You should have believed him. Kate's face crumpled. Students watched as their teacher, the same woman who'd screamed at Anderson 15 minutes ago, wiped her tears like a child being scolded. The reversal was brutal. It was justice. Mark inhaled deeply, steadily, controlled. He placed a hand on Anderson's notebook and lifted it from her grip. She let go instantly. Then he looked into her eyes. No anger, no shouting, just a quiet intensity that shook her harder than any scream. Mrs. Moore, he said. Kate swallowed. Yes. Mark leaned forward just enough that she felt his presence wash over her like cold wind. Do you know what you did to my boy? Kate froze completely. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened. Her knees nearly buckled. Anderson's classmates stared, wide-eyed, stunned, waiting for the explosion that they could feel coming. Kate managed to whisper, I heard him. Mark stepped closer. His voice dropped to something dangerous, something powerful enough to silence the world. No, he pointed at Anderson. You broke him. Kate's tears fell harder. The room held its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. Kate's chest trembled as she stared at the billionaire who now saw her as the threat she truly was. And before she could respond, Mark straightened his suit, turned slightly, and took one step toward the center of the classroom, ready to reveal his next move. Mark asked the single question that destroys her. Do you know what you did to my boy? And he's far from finished. Drop your thoughts. Was the teacher wrong? What time are you watching this? For the first time since the confrontation started, the classroom felt fragile. Not tense, not hostile, just fragile, like one wrong breath could shatter every heart present. Mark Hebron's words still hung in the air like thunder breaking through the walls. You broke him. And on those words alone, the atmosphere shifted. The bullies lowered their eyes. The whisperers fell silent. The room full of kids who laughed just minutes ago now wished they could rewind time. All eyes drifted to one person. Anderson, the quiet boy, the gentle boy, the boy they all doubted. He sat small in his chair, hands shaking on his knees, eyes still swollen from crying. But now he didn't hide his face. He looked up at his teacher, at his classmates, at the world that made him shrink. And something inside him cracked open. Mark stood beside him, tall, powerful, protective, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. This was Anderson's moment. The classroom waited. Anderson's voice trembled as he finally spoke. Mrs. Moore, everyone, I wasn't lying. I've never been lying. A few kids looked down at their desks. Anderson swallowed hard. You all think it's fun to tease me, or whisper things, or laugh when I say something weird. He wiped a tear. But you don't know what it's like to have a dad who can't come to school. Not because he doesn't want to, but because if he walks into a parking lot, 50 cameras follow him. More students shifted uncomfortably. Anderson continued, voice cracking. You don't know what it's like when people look at you and decide who you must be. When they think your dad is gone, or dead, or doesn't care. His bottom lip trembled. When the truth is, he calls me every night, even when he's on the other side of the world. Mark's face tightened. Pain flickered behind his eyes. I never bragged, Anderson whispered. I never wanted to. I just wanted to be normal, to fit in, to not be the kid everybody looks at funny. The room was silent. Not one student dared breathe. Anderson looked directly at the classmates who laughed the hardest yesterday. You guys call me a liar all the time, and I pretended it didn't hurt. A few kids teared up. But it did. It really, really did. He looked down into his hands. I stopped talking about my family because I got tired of feeling like nobody ever believed me, like I wasn't good enough to belong to someone successful. A girl sniffed loudly. A boy rubbed his eyes, embarrassed. Anderson's voice grew softer, smaller. And today when he nodded toward Kate, said I was lying about my dad, it felt like everything inside me broke. Kate's knees bent slightly, and she grabbed the edge of her desk for support. Even she could no longer hide the devastation painted across her face. The confident teacher, the strict authority figure, the woman who thought she knew everything, was gone. In her place stood a trembling, horrified shell of a person. I didn't know, Kate whispered, voice shaking violently. I truly didn't know how badly I hurt you. Anderson blinked at her. You didn't even ask, he said quietly. You just yelled. Kate covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled onto her blazer. I am so sorry, she whispered, voice cracking. I failed you. I failed you completely. She lowered herself into her chair, unable to stand any longer, her legs shaking too hard to keep supporting her. She wasn't just sad. She was broken. For the first time in years, she saw herself clearly, and it hurt. Mark inhaled deeply. Then he slowly lowered himself until he was at eye level with his son, kneeling on one knee, ignoring the fact he was wearing a suit worth more than the teacher's car. His voice softened, not as the billionaire, but as a father. Anderson, he said gently, look at me. The boy wiped his eyes and looked up. Mark rested a steady, comforting hand on his son's shoulder. You never have to hide who you are again, he said. Not for them. Not for adults. Not for anyone. Anderson's breath caught. Mark continued. You're my son, my pride, my legacy. The world may doubt you, but I never will. Anderson blinked rapidly, tears blurring his vision. Mark's voice deepened. And if anyone struggles to accept who you are, he shot a cold glance toward Kate. That's their limitation, not yours. The class went silent again. The weight of that moment was enormous. A billionaire father defending his child in front of the very people who tore him down. One student whispered, I feel so bad. Another murmured, he didn't deserve this. Kate pressed her hands to her forehead, overcome with guilt. Mark pulled his son into a quiet hug, gentle, protective, grounding. Anderson melted into him, feeling safe for the first time in months. The classroom watched, hearts aching, guilt burning through them like fire. Some kids cried lightly. Some covered their faces. Some whispered apologies to themselves, even before they'd spoken them aloud. It was a moment the class would never forget, and a moment that would change Anderson's life forever. The door opened slightly. Both security guards reappeared. Their faces were stern. Their posture was alert, and the room's fragile peace shattered instantly. The taller guard approached Mark and spoke quietly, leaning down just enough. Sir, you need to see this. He handed Mark a black folder. Thick, sealed, stamped with a gold emblem Anderson didn't recognize. Mark's expression shifted, just slightly. But Anderson noticed. Everyone noticed. The calm billionaire father expression changed. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. Something cold washed through his posture. Something that said, whatever was inside that folder was serious. Very serious. And not good. Anderson's heart thumped. Dad, what is it? Mark didn't answer. Not yet. He stared at the folder, like it held a storm waiting to break. Security hands Mark a sealed folder. Something urgent he must see. His expression changes instantly. What's inside that folder will change everything. Hit like if this part hit your heart. Subscribe because the twist is heavy. For the first time since the confrontation started, the classroom felt fragile. Not tense. Not hostile. Just fragile, like one wrong breath could shatter every heart present. Mark Hebron's words still hung in the air like thunder breaking through the walls. You broke him. And on those words alone, the atmosphere shifted. The bullies lowered their eyes. The whisperers fell silent. The room full of kids who laughed just minutes ago now wished they could rewind time. All eyes drifted to one person. Anderson, the quiet boy, the gentle boy, the boy they all doubted. He sat small in his chair, hands shaking on his knees, eyes still swollen from crying. But now he didn't hide his face. He looked up at his teacher, at his classmates, at the world that made him shrink. And something inside him cracked open. Mark stood beside him, tall, powerful, protective, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. This was Anderson's moment. The classroom waited. Anderson's voice trembled as he finally spoke. Mrs. Moore, everyone, I wasn't lying. I've never been lying. A few kids looked down at their desks. Anderson swallowed hard. You all think it's fun to tease me. or whisper things, or laugh when I say something weird. He wiped a tear. But you don't know what it's like to have a dad who can't come to school. Not because he doesn't want to, but because if he walks into a parking lot, 50 cameras follow him. More students shifted uncomfortably. Anderson continued, voice cracking. You don't know what it's like when people look at you and decide who you must be, when they think your dad is gone, or dead, or doesn't care. His bottom lip trembled. When the truth is, he calls me every night, even when he's on the other side of the world. Mark's face tightened. Pain flickered behind his eyes. I never bragged, Anderson whispered. I never wanted to. I just wanted to be normal, to fit in, to not be the kid everybody looks at funny. The room was silent. Not one student dared breathe. Anderson looked directly at the classmates who laughed the hardest yesterday. You guys call me a liar all the time, and I pretended it didn't hurt. A few kids teared up. But it did. It really, really did. He looked down into his hands. I stopped talking about my family because I got tired of feeling like nobody ever believed me, like I wasn't good enough to belong to someone successful. A girl sniffed loudly. A boy rubbed his eyes, embarrassed. Anderson's voice grew softer, smaller. And today when he nodded toward Kate, said I was lying about my dad, it felt like everything inside me broke. Kate's knees bent slightly, and she grabbed the edge of her desk for support. Even she could no longer hide the devastation painted across her face. The confident teacher, the strict authority figure, the woman who thought she knew everything, was gone. In her place stood a trembling, horrified shell of a person. I didn't know, Kate whispered, voice shaking violently. I truly didn't know how badly I hurt you. Anderson blinked at her. You didn't even ask, he said quietly. You just yelled. Kate covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled onto her blazer. I am so sorry, she whispered, voice cracking. I failed you. I failed you completely. She lowered herself into her chair, unable to stand any longer, her legs shaking too hard to keep supporting her. She wasn't just sad. She was broken. For the first time in years, she saw herself clearly, and it hurt. Mark inhaled deeply. Then he slowly lowered himself until he was at eye level with his son, kneeling on one knee, ignoring the fact he was wearing a suit worth more than the teacher's car. His voice softened, not as the billionaire, but as a father. Anderson, he said gently, look at me. The boy wiped his eyes and looked up. Mark rested a steady, comforting hand on his son's shoulder. You never have to hide who you are again, he said. Not for them. Not for adults. Not for anyone. Anderson's breath caught. Mark continued. You're my son, my pride, my legacy. The world may doubt you, but I never will. Anderson blinked rapidly, tears blurring his vision. Mark's voice deepened. And if anyone struggles to accept who you are, he shot a cold glance toward Kate. That's their limitation, not yours. The class went silent again. The weight of that moment was enormous. A billionaire father defending his child in front of the very people who tore him down. One student whispered, I feel so bad. Another murmured, he didn't deserve this. Kate pressed her hands to her forehead, overcome with guilt. Mark pulled his son into a quiet hug, gentle, protective, grounding. Anderson melted into him, feeling safe for the first time in months. The classroom watched, hearts aching, guilt burning through them like fire. Some kids cried lightly. Some covered their faces. Some whispered apologies to themselves, even before they'd spoken them aloud. It was a moment the class would never forget, and a moment that would change Anderson's life forever. The door opened slightly. Both security guards reappeared. Their faces were stern. Their posture was alert, and the room's fragile peace shattered instantly. The taller guard approached Mark and spoke quietly, leaning down just enough. Sir, you need to see this. He handed Mark a black folder. Thick, sealed, stamped with a gold emblem Anderson didn't recognize. Mark's expression shifted, just slightly. But Anderson noticed. Everyone noticed. The calm billionaire father expression changed. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. Something cold washed through his posture. Something that said, whatever was inside that folder was serious. very serious. And not good. Anderson's heart thumped. "Dad, what is it?" Mark didn't answer. Not yet. He stared at the folder, like it held a storm waiting to break. Security hands Mark a sealed folder. Something urgent he must see. His expression changes instantly. What's inside that folder will change everything. Hit like if this part hit your heart. Subscribe because the twist is heavy. For the first time since the confrontation started, the classroom felt fragile. Not tense, not hostile, just fragile, like one wrong breath could shatter every heart present. Mark Hebron's words still hung in the air like thunder breaking through the walls. "You broke him." And on those words alone, the atmosphere shifted. The bullies lowered their eyes. The whisperers fell silent. The room full of kids who laughed just minutes ago now wished they could rewind time. All eyes drifted to one person. Anderson, the quiet boy, the gentle boy, the boy they all doubted. He sat small in his chair, hands shaking on his knees, eyes still swollen from crying. But now he didn't hide his face. He looked up at his teacher, at his classmates, at the world that made him shrink. And something inside him cracked open. Mark stood beside him, tall, powerful, protective, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. This was Anderson's moment. The classroom waited. Anderson's voice trembled as he finally spoke. "Mrs. Moore, everyone, I wasn't lying. I've never been lying." A few kids looked down at their desks. Anderson swallowed hard. "You all think it's fun to tease me, or whisper things, or laugh when I say something weird." He wiped a tear. "But you don't know what it's like to have a dad who can't come to school. Not because he doesn't want to, but because if he walks into a parking lot, 50 cameras follow him." More students shifted uncomfortably. Anderson continued, voice cracking. "You don't know what it's like when people look at you and decide who you must be, when they think your dad is gone, or dead, or doesn't care." His bottom lip trembled. "When the truth is, he calls me every night, even when he's on the other side of the world." Mark's face tightened. Pain flickered behind his eyes. "I never bragged," Anderson whispered. "I never wanted to. I just wanted to be normal, to fit in, to not be the kid everybody looks at funny." The room was silent. Not one student dared breathe. Anderson looked directly at the classmates who laughed the hardest yesterday. "You guys call me a liar all the time, and I pretended it didn't hurt." A few kids teared up. "But it did. It really, really did." He looked down into his hands. "I stopped talking about my family because I got tired of feeling like nobody ever believed me, like I wasn't good enough to belong to someone successful." A girl sniffed loudly. A boy rubbed his eyes, embarrassed. Anderson's voice grew softer, smaller. And today when he nodded toward Kate, said I was lying about my dad, it felt like everything inside me broke. Kate's knees bent slightly, and she grabbed the edge of her desk for support. Even she could no longer hide the devastation painted across her face. The confident teacher, the strict authority figure, the woman who thought she knew everything, was gone. In her place stood a trembling, horrified shell of a person. I didn't know," Kate whispered, voice shaking violently. "I truly didn't know how badly I hurt you." Anderson blinked at her. "You didn't even ask," he said quietly. "You just yelled." Kate covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled onto her blazer. "I am so sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. I failed you completely." She lowered herself into her chair, unable to stand any longer, her legs shaking too hard to keep supporting her. She wasn't just sad, she was broken. For the first time in years, she saw herself clearly, and it hurt. Mark inhaled deeply. Then he slowly lowered himself until he was at eye level with his son, kneeling on one knee, ignoring the fact he was wearing a suit worth more than the teacher's car. His voice softened, not as the billionaire, but as a father. "Anderson," he said gently, "look at me." The boy wiped his eyes and looked up. Mark rested a steady, comforting hand on his son's shoulder. "You never have to hide who you are again," he said. "Not for them. Not for adults. Not for anyone." Anderson's breath caught. Mark continued, "You're my son, my pride, my legacy. The world may doubt you, But I never will. Anderson blinked rapidly, tears blurring his vision. Mark's voice deepened. And if anyone struggles to accept who you are, he shot a cold glance toward Kate. That's their limitation, not yours. The class went silent again. The weight of that moment was enormous. A billionaire father defending his child in front of the very people who tore him down. One student whispered, "I feel so bad." Another murmured, "He didn't deserve this." Kate pressed her hands to her forehead, overcome with guilt. Mark pulled his son into a quiet hug, gentle, protective, grounding. Anderson melted into him, feeling safe for the first time in months. The classroom watched, hearts aching, guilt burning through them like fire. Some kids cried lightly. Some covered their faces. Some whispered apologies to themselves, even before they'd spoken them aloud. It was a moment the class would never forget, and a moment that would change Anderson's life forever. The door opened slightly. Both security guards reappeared. Their faces were stern. Their posture was alert, and the room's fragile peace shattered instantly. The taller guard approached Mark and spoke quietly, leaning down just enough. "Sir, you need to see this." He handed Mark a black folder. Thick, sealed, stamped with a gold emblem Anderson didn't recognize. Mark's expression shifted, just slightly. But Anderson noticed. Everyone noticed. The calm billionaire father expression changed. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. Something cold washed through his posture. Something that said, whatever was inside that folder was serious. Very serious. And not good. Anderson's heart thumped. "Dad, what is it?" Mark didn't answer. Not yet. He stared at the folder, like it held a storm waiting to break. Security hands Mark a sealed folder. Something urgent he must see. His expression changes instantly. What's inside that folder will change everything. Hit like if this part hit your heart. Subscribe because the twist is heavy. The gymnasium of Lincoln Elementary had never been this full. Students filled the bleachers, whispering nervously. Parents crowded the aisles, gripping their phones like they were holding on to truth itself. Teachers stood along the walls, trying to look calm while the school board watched them closely. Camera crews positioned themselves at the back. Journalists whispered into microphones. Flashlights flickered like fireflies. And in the center of it all, standing on the small, faded school stage, was Mark Hebron, a billionaire, a father, a man with the attention of an entire city. And right beside him, clutching his hand, was Anderson. The room quieted as Mark stepped to the microphone. He didn't bang it to test it. He didn't ask if people could hear. He simply started speaking, and the silence swallowed the sound. "Good afternoon," Mark said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The room leaned in. "My name, as many of you know, is Mark Hebron." A few gasps rippled through the crowd at hearing it up close. "But today," he continued, "I am not here as a CEO. I am not here as a billionaire. I am not here as the owner of Hebron Industries." He paused. "I am here as a father." Some parents exhaled shakily. Some swallowed their guilt. Mark looked down at Anderson, and the softness in his eyes deepened. "My son went through something no child should ever go through." He placed a hand gently on Anderson's shoulder. He was humiliated, accused, laughed at, and told, by an adult who should have protected him, that he was lying about who he is. He let the words sink in. "And the reason," he said slowly, "was an assumption." A teacher in the audience lowered her head. Another crossed her arms, uncomfortable. "An assumption," Mark repeated, "that a child who looks like my son couldn't possibly belong to a man like me." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Some faces burned with guilt, some with shame, some with realization. Mark's expression hardened. "Prejudice doesn't always shout," he said. "Sometimes it whispers." He scanned the room slowly. It whispers through doubt, through disbelief, through the tiny smirk when a child achieves something too good, through the suspicion when a minority student excels, through the question, "Are you sure you did this?" Several teachers shifted in discomfort. "And it whispers loudest," he added, "when a child's truth is dismissed without a second thought." Gasps emerged. A parent wiped a tear. Someone muttered, "He's right." Mark placed Anderson's notebook on the podium. "This book contains an assignment," he said, opening it. "A simple assignment." He read the words aloud. "Describe your father's job." He held the page up for the room to see. My son told the truth. He wrote the truth. He spoke the truth. He closed the book slowly. And he was punished for it. The crowd fell silent again. A teacher humiliated him. A class laughed at him. A school failed him. Kate Moore, seated at the front with the board, lowered her head in shame, tears silently running down her cheeks. But the cost wasn't just embarrassment, Mark continued. It was identity. It was dignity. It was a belief that he wasn't allowed to be who he truly is. His voice tightened. And that kind of wound cuts deeper than detention, deeper than suspension, deeper than any written apology. The room felt the weight of every syllable. Mark lifted the microphone slightly. "Children are honest," he said, "often brutally honest. But we, as adults, teach them to stop telling the truth." He gestured to the crowd. "We tell them their voices don't matter. We tell them their experiences aren't real. We tell them their identity is too much, too impossible, too unbelievable." He stepped forward, closer to the edge of the stage. "And that must stop." Parents nodded. Teachers hung their heads. Some were crying. "We must teach children that truth is valued, that their stories matter, that their voices deserve to be heard." Then he looked back at Anderson. "And above all," his voice softened, "that they never have to shrink themselves to fit into someone else's small box." Anderson blinked up at him, and for the first time in the entire story, he smiled. A real smile. A soft, restored one. Mark turned back to the crowd. "As of today," he said firmly, "this school will undergo a complete, independent audit." Gasps. Whispers. Shockwaves. The board will review disciplinary records, teacher conduct, testing disparities, complaints that were ignored, and every pattern of bias, overt or subtle, that harmed children in this building. Cameras flashed. Journalists scrambled to write. "And let me be clear," he said, eyes narrowing slightly. "The results of this audit will be made public." Teachers stiffened. Parents leaned forward anxiously. "And the reforms will begin immediately," Mark added, "to protect children like my son, children who deserve better than the treatment they received." He tapped the podium lightly. "Children don't choose the world they're born into. We choose the world we hand to them." He stepped back from a microphone. The entire room jumped to its feet. Students, parents, teachers who'd been silent, board members. Applause thundered through the gym. Some parents cried. Even the journalists looked moved. Anderson stood beside his dad, chest rising and falling fast, like something heavy had been lifted off him, like he finally felt seen, valued, believed, protected. The applause slowly quieted. Mark turned to Anderson, kneeling so they were eye to eye. His voice softened into a whisper meant only for him. "Son," he murmured, "I'm not done fixing this." Anderson frowned slightly. "There's more." Mark nodded. "One more thing," he whispered, "and it needs to be done today." Anderson's heart fluttered with fear and anticipation. "What is it?" he whispered back. Mark gave a small, reassuring smile. "We'll do it together." Mark kneels and whispers, "I'm not done fixing this. We have one more thing to do." What could be left? Comment where you're watching from, because here's the final transformation. Lincoln Elementary had never seen so many suits in one room. School board members, district superintendents, policy officers, counselors, education consultants, and journalists still lingering outside, hungry for the next headline. But none of them mattered as much as a 10-year-old boy sitting quietly beside his father in the front row. Anderson Hebron. He swung his legs nervously, trying to read his father's expression. Mark sat straight, calm, serious, but not angry, determined, the kind of determination that changes school systems, cities, maybe even the country. The school leadership sat across from Mark, tense and uncomfortable. Principal Hargrove cleared his throat. "Mr. Hebron, we are deeply sorry. What happened to your son?" Mark held up a hand. "Don't apologize yet. Fix it first. The room went still. Anderson glanced up at his father, that familiar mix of awe and comfort filling his chest. Whenever his dad spoke like that, people listened, not because he was rich, but because he spoke like a man who expected things to change. Mark stood, opening a folder of documents the security team had handed him earlier. "Before I talk about what I want," he said evenly, "let's talk about what this school has ignored." He placed several pages on the table. Reports of bullying, ignored. Minority students disciplined disproportionately, ignored. Parents complaining about bias, filed away but ignored. Each page echoed like a slap. The superintendent's face drained of color. "These aren't opinions," Mark said. "These are patterns. And patterns reveal culture." He turned to Anderson. "And culture is what failed my son." Anderson swallowed. His hands tightened on the seat edge. "But," Mark continued, "we are not here to shame anyone. We are here to build something better." Mark placed a new set of papers on the table. "I am offering a full-funded initiative through the Hebron Foundation." The leaders leaned forward. "A 3-part program," he said. 1. Anti-bias and equity training. Every staff member will undergo certified equity and anti-bias training, not as punishment, but as renewal. Kate Moore, sitting 2 chairs away, wiped her eyes. 2. Student Wellness and Mental Health Center. I will fund a new on-campus mental health and emotional safety center. Children like my son need support, not just discipline. A hushed murmur filled the room. Even the school board looked stunned. 3. A safety and accountability reform. A transparent reporting system for students, especially those too afraid to speak. He folded his hands. And every child who walks through these doors should know they are seen, they are safe, they are believed. Silence. Pure, awe-filled silence. Principal Hargrove exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "Mr. Hebron," he whispered, "this could transform everything." "It will," Mark replied, "and I'll be overseeing the process personally." Anderson's eyes widened. His father wasn't just fixing things. He was building something better than what had existed before. All eyes suddenly fell on Kate Moore. Her red blazer looked less powerful now, more like a reminder of everything she had done wrong. She stood shakily. "I know I can't undo what I did," she said, voice trembling. "I hurt a child. I humiliated him. I failed as a teacher." Her eyes went to Anderson. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I truly am." Anderson looked down, unsure how to respond. Kate continued, "I want to participate in every training program. All of them. Not because it's required, but because I need to change." Her voice cracked. "And if Anderson ever allows it, I want to earn back trust. Not through words, but through who I become." Mark studied her for a long, heavy moment. "Growth is possible," he finally said, "for everyone." Kate let out a breath, not relief, but gratitude for the chance to do better. The meeting ended with signatures, reforms, plans, and timelines. By the time Mark and Anderson stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set, pouring gold across the school courtyard. Parents were still gathered outside. Students peeked from behind benches. Reporters lifted their cameras. But something was different. They weren't staring at Anderson like a mystery. They were staring at him with respect, some even with admiration. One boy who had laughed at him earlier walked up shyly. "Hey, Anderson," he rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't know." "I'm sorry." Another chimed in, "I won't laugh at you again." A girl added softly, "Your dad is cool." Anderson blinked at them, confused, then surprised, then relieved. He didn't feel small anymore. He didn't feel like a liar. He didn't feel like the boy who was always doubted. He felt whole for the first time. Mark rested a hand on his son's back. "You okay?" he asked gently. Anderson nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." They began walking toward the car. "You were brave today," Mark said. "Braver than most adults I know." Anderson smiled shyly. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Mark paused. "Son," he said softly, kneeling in front of him, "there is nothing on earth important enough to stop me from defending you. Not business. Not money. Not anything. Tears welled in Anderson's eyes. But this time, they weren't from fear. They were from love. Mark stood and opened his arms. Anderson hugged him tightly, burying his face in his father's side. The cameras clicked. People watched. But at that moment, none of it mattered. Just father and son. Together. Stronger. Healing. As they stepped out of the school gate, sunlight washed over them, bright, warm, triumphant. Anderson looked back one last time at the building that had bruised him, and now was being rebuilt because of him. Not because he was a billionaire's son, but because he told the truth and refused to let someone bury it. "Dad," he said quietly as they walked, "can we help other kids too?" Mark smiled. "That's exactly what we're going to do next." And with that, the two walked side by side into a future they were building together. What should Anderson's next story be? Because a boy who found his voice today might change the world tomorrow. Drop your idea in the comments and subscribe if you want the next episode.